The sound of shattered glass echoed through the grand, empty mansion as a crystal champagne flute hit the marble floor, scattering shards across the room. Matthias stood motionless in the center of the chaos, his breath heavy, his fists clenched. The glow of fireworks outside the towering windows painted his face with flickering bursts of color, but his eyes were fixed on the disarray around him, the overturned tables, broken decorations, and scattered remnants of what was supposed to be a perfect New Year's Eve. For a man who had everything, he suddenly felt like he had nothing. What had gone so wrong? How had he ended up here, on the brink of losing not just his empire, but himself? As the echoes faded into silence, Matthias slowly knelt down, his gaze falling on a single, untouched champagne bottle lying amid the wreckage. Its label bore the words, "For New Beginnings." He exhaled, his jaw tightening as a faint glimmer of resolve flickered in his eyes. "This isn't the end," he murmured, and for the first time in months, he started to believe it. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the sprawling mansion nestled in the hills of Los Angeles. The driveway was lined with sleek, expensive cars, each a statement of wealth and status. Inside, the world of Matthias Rodriguez was a curated spectacle of luxury. The polished marble floors gleamed under the soft light of chandeliers, while oversized windows framed breathtaking views of the city below. It was a setting befitting a man who had seemingly conquered the world before turning 30. Matthias stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows in his tailored suit, his reflection overlapping the shimmering skyline. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages and notifications from followers and admirers on social media. Each post he shared, whether it was of a limited edition watch or a lavish dinner, garnered thousands of likes within minutes. To his audience, he was the epitome of success, a visionary entrepreneur who had turned a modest skincare line into a global brand. Yet, beneath the surface, there was a growing tension. His company, Glow Pure, was preparing to launch its most ambitious product yet, a revolutionary serum marketed as the pinnacle of beauty innovation. Matthias had poured millions into its development, trusting bold marketing over the cautious warnings of his research team. He leaned on the allure of his brand and the loyalty of his followers, confident they would embrace anything he endorsed. The mansion buzzed with activity. Marketing teams huddled in the open-plan living room, surrounded by laptops and mood boards. Photographers adjusted their lighting setups near the pool, capturing content for the campaign. Models rehearsed their lines for the promotional video while sipping sparkling water from crystal glasses. Every corner of the house was alive with the energy of impending success. Matthias walked through the organized chaos, his presence commanding attention. He stopped to greet an influencer who had flown in for a private product preview. Their handshake was captured by a photographer, an image destined for the company's social media. His confidence seemed unshakable as he reassured his staff and investors that the product's launch would be a resounding success, but not everyone shared his optimism. In the kitchen, two junior staff members whispered nervously, "I heard the formula isn't ready," one of them said, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "The lab team said it doesn't deliver on the claims." "It doesn't matter," the other replied. "Matthias thinks the brand can sell anything. People buy the dream, not the product." Meanwhile, in the home office upstairs, Sarah, his head of research, sat alone, staring at the final report on the serum. She had tried to raise concerns during the last meeting, but Matthias had brushed her off, insisting that the product's appeal would overshadow any minor shortcomings. She hesitated, then closed her laptop with a sigh. The die was cast, and there was no turning back. As night fell, the house transformed for the pre-launch event. Soft jazz played over hidden speakers, and waitstaff circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres and champagne. The massive Christmas tree in the foyer, adorned with gold and white ornaments, added a festive touch. Guests arrived in designer attire, mingling and exchanging compliments. Matthias stood at the center of it all, the perfect host. He raised a glass to his guests, delivering a charismatic speech about innovation, beauty, and his journey from obscurity to global recognition. The applause that followed was thunderous, yet his smile faltered for a brief moment as he glanced toward the tree. For reasons he couldn't explain, the sight of it stirred a flicker of unease. "Everything is perfect," he reminded himself, brushing off the feeling. As the night wore on, Mateus retreated to his private lounge, away from the crowd. He scrolled through his phone, watching the pre-launch buzz build online. Hashtags like #GlowPureRevolution were trending, and the initial response seemed overwhelmingly positive. Still, there was a part of him that felt restless, as if something was missing. He stared out at the city lights, a glass of champagne in hand. From this vantage point, his empire seemed unshakable. But deep inside, a small voice whispered doubts that he was not yet ready to face. The morning sun broke over Los Angeles, casting a soft glow on the mansion that had become a hub of activity. Mateus's grand estate no longer felt like a home but rather a high-end production set. Trucks filled with equipment and props lined the driveway. The faint hum of generators mixed with the chatter of production crews and the whirring of drones capturing aerial shots of the house. Today marked the final countdown to the product's launch, and every detail had to be perfect. Inside, the energy was electric. The living room had been transformed into a makeshift studio, with backdrops, ring lights, and cameras dominating the space. On a nearby table, bottles of GlowPure's new serum were meticulously arranged, their sleek, minimalist design meant to exude elegance and sophistication. The tagline, "Beauty Beyond Perfection," was prominently displayed on screens around the room, a mantra that Mateus had repeated endlessly to his team over the past months. Mateus emerged from his office, dressed impeccably in a tailored shirt and slacks, his presence commanding immediate attention. He surveyed the room, his sharp eyes scanning every detail. The models rehearsed their lines in one corner, while the social media team reviewed a draft of the campaign's main video. "Let's make sure the lighting highlights the product," Mateus said, stepping toward the camera crew. "This serum isn't just another skincare product, it's a revolution. People need to feel that in every shot." His words carried the authority of someone who believed fully in his vision. Yet, even as he spoke, a quiet tension lingered in the room. Among the staff, whispers of concern had begun to circulate. In the dining room, Sarah, the head of research, was in a heated conversation with Daniel, the marketing director. "I'm telling you, Daniel, this is risky," Sarah said, her voice low but firm. "The formula hasn't been tested thoroughly enough. If it doesn't deliver, it'll ruin everything." Daniel sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, I understand your concerns, but this isn't my call. Mateus is convinced this product will succeed, and we're too deep to back out now. The launch is tomorrow. What do you expect us to do?" Sarah glanced toward the living room, where Mateus was giving directions to a photographer. She wanted to confront him, to plead for more time, but she knew how that conversation would go. He would dismiss her worries, as he had so many times before, and remind her that perfection wasn't as important as perception. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the junior staff scrambled to assemble gift bags for the influencers attending the event. Each bag contained a bottle of the serum, custom chocolates, and a handwritten note from Mateus himself. "Do you think they'll actually use it?" one assistant muttered, carefully placing tissue paper into a bag. "Who knows?" another replied. "Most of them probably just post a picture and move on. It's all about the illusion." Mateus's voice cut through the hum of activity. "Team, gather around." Everyone stopped what they were doing and moved toward the center of the room. Mateus stood next to a screen displaying the final campaign video. He gestured for the lights to be dimmed. "This is it," he said, his tone filled with anticipation. "This video is the heart of our launch. It's what will make people believe in GlowPure and what we stand for." The video began to play. It was a glossy, cinematic montage of radiant models applying the serum, their skin glowing under perfect lighting. Images of nature, pristine waterfalls, blooming flowers, were interspersed with shots of the product, accompanied by a dramatic score. The tagline appeared at the end, glowing softly, "Beauty Beyond Perfection." When the video ended, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted in applause. "It's incredible," Daniel said, clapping Mateus on the shoulder. "This is going to be huge." But Sarah remained silent, her arms crossed. She could feel the weight of what was at stake. and it unsettled her. As the day wore on, the preparations continued with meticulous precision. Influencers began arriving at the mansion, greeted by a red carpet lined with photographers. Each guest received a glass of champagne and was escorted to a sleek lounge area where the product was displayed under glowing lights. Mateus moved through the crowd with ease, shaking hands and posing for photos. His charm was effortless, his confidence unwavering. To everyone around him, he appeared as the perfect host, a man on the brink of another monumental success. But in quieter moments, cracks began to show. When he stepped into his office to check on the live social media feed, he found himself staring at the screen longer than necessary, his thoughts drifting. He had built his empire on the promise of transformation, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something about this launch was different. In the late afternoon, as the sun began to set, Mateus walked out onto the balcony overlooking the city. The glow of Los Angeles stretched out before him, a reminder of everything he had achieved. But as he stood there, sipping his coffee, his gaze shifted to the horizon. A flicker of doubt passed through his mind. Uninvited and unwelcome, the voices of his staff calling him back inside brought him out of his thoughts. He straightened his shoulders, pushing the doubt aside. There was no time for second-guessing. The launch was set, and he was determined to make it a success. By evening, the mansion was alive with the hum of excitement. Final rehearsals were underway, and Mateus gave a speech to his team, thanking them for their hard work. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "Tomorrow, we make history." The team cheered, their energy renewed. But as the room buzzed with anticipation, Sarah stood at the back, her expression unreadable. She held the final lab report in her hand, knowing it would never see the light of day. For Mateus, the day had been a triumph of image and ambition. But beneath the surface, tensions brewed, and the cracks in his flawless facade threatened to widen. Tomorrow would bring the culmination of months of effort, but it would also set the stage for the challenges he was not yet prepared to face. The big day had finally arrived. The mansion was abuzz with activity as early as dawn. Trucks delivered fresh floral arrangements, catering staff set up champagne towers, and last-minute adjustments were made to the massive stage erected by the infinity pool. The event wasn't just a product launch, it was a spectacle designed to showcase Mateus's brilliance and the pinnacle of Glopure's success. Guests began to arrive in waves, their luxury cars rolling up the driveway as photographers captured their every move. Influencers in designer outfits posed with mock samples of the serum, holding them up to the camera as they smiled for the perfect shot. Celebrities mingled near the photo wall, where Glopure's logo glowed in neon against a backdrop of lush greenery. Mateus stood at the center of it all, his tailored suit impeccable, his smile practiced. He greeted guests with an air of confidence, as though nothing could possibly go wrong. To the outside world, he appeared invincible, a young mogul who had mastered the art of success. But as the event progressed, small signs of tension began to surface. In the control room tucked away near the kitchen, the tech team was scrambling. "The server is overloaded," one of them said, his voice tight with panic. "We've got too many live streams going at once." "Just prioritize the main stream," another replied. "Mateus wants everything to look seamless." The stress was palpable, but Mateus remained unfazed. He focused on delivering the perfect experience for his guests. As he moved through the crowd, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries, he made a mental note of the social media buzz. Glopure was trending across multiple platforms, with hashtags like #GlopureRevolution and #MateusMagic flooding the internet. Finally, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. Mateus took the stage to thunderous applause. The backdrop behind him displayed a massive image of the serum, its sleek design illuminated by spotlights. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice carrying the practiced charisma of a seasoned public speaker. "Tonight, we celebrate not just a product, but a revolution. Glopure's new serum isn't just skincare, it's the future of beauty. It's innovation, transformation, and confidence in a bottle." The crowd erupted in cheers as Mateus raised a bottle of the serum in the air. Photographers captured the moment, and flashes lit up the night sky. He pressed a button on the podium, and the stage lights dimmed as a promotional video played on the massive screen. The video was nothing short of cinematic. Models with glowing skin walked through pristine forests and along crystal-clear streams. The serum was shown in close-up, its formula swirling like liquid gold in a sleek glass bottle. The tagline appeared on screen, "Glow Pure, Beauty Beyond Perfection." As the video ended, the crowd erupted once again. Matthias stepped down from the stage, shaking hands with investors and posing for photos with influencers. Everything seemed to be going perfectly, until it wasn't. It started subtly. One of the influencers pulled Matthias aside, her tone light but her words sharp. "I tried the serum last night," she said. "It felt great at first, but then my skin got red and blotchy. Are you sure it's safe?" Matthias brushed off her concern with a charming smile. "It's perfectly safe. Your skin might just be adjusting to the active ingredients. Give it a few more days." But as the night went on, whispers of dissatisfaction began to spread. Several attendees murmured about their own experiences with the serum, and the initial excitement started to wane. Meanwhile, online, the situation was escalating rapidly. Comments flooded Glow Pure's social media pages, some praising the launch but others raising serious concerns about the product's performance. By midnight, the hashtag #GlowPureFail was gaining traction, fueled by negative reviews from early users who claimed the serum didn't live up to its promises. Back at the mansion, Matthias retreated to his office, away from the glittering party. He stared at his phone, watching the backlash unfold in real time. Every notification felt like a blow to his carefully constructed empire. He opened a live stream where a popular beauty influencer was testing the product on camera. "This is disappointing," the influencer said, holding up the serum. "It's not doing anything it promised. I've seen drugstore products perform better than this." Her words cut deeper than Matthias expected. He slammed his phone down on the desk and buried his head in his hands. Downstairs, the atmosphere at the party was changing. Guests began leaving earlier than expected, murmuring their goodbyes with forced smiles. The staff avoided making eye contact with Matthias as they cleaned up the remnants of the celebration. The grandeur of the event was fading quickly, replaced by an uneasy silence. By morning, the fallout was impossible to ignore. News outlets picked up the story, with headlines like "Glow Pure's Glow Fizzles" and "Is Matthias the king of hype or the king of flops?" Stock prices for Glow Pure plummeted as investors lost confidence in the brand. Matthias's phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages from journalists, employees, and board members demanding answers. He ignored most of them, choosing instead to isolate himself in his mansion. The lavish home that had once been a symbol of his success now felt like a gilded cage. He paced the living room, his mind racing. How had it come to this? He had built his empire on the promise of perfection, yet he now stood on the brink of losing everything. For the first time, he began to question whether his relentless pursuit of image and status had blinded him to what truly mattered. By afternoon, the mansion was eerily quiet. The staff had left, and the decorations from the launch event sat untouched, a stark reminder of the night's failure. Matthias wandered aimlessly through the empty halls, his thoughts heavy. As he passed the Christmas tree in the foyer, he stopped. The tree, once a beacon of festive cheer, now seemed out of place. In a sudden burst of frustration, Matthias kicked one of the wrapped boxes beneath it, sending it sliding across the marble floor. The action startled even him. He stared at the tree, breathing heavily, as the weight of his failure pressed down on him. For the first time in years, Matthias felt truly lost. The house, once alive with ambition and energy, now felt hollow. And for the first time, Matthias began to wonder if the life he had built was as fragile as the glass ornaments on the tree he had just disturbed. The morning after the disastrous launch was heavy with silence. The mansion, once alive with the hum of activity, felt desolate. Decorations from the event remained in place, but they now seemed like ghosts of a celebration that had turned sour. Matthias sat alone in the dining room, staring at his untouched coffee. His usually pristine appearance was disheveled, his shirt rumpled, tie undone, and dark circles forming under his eyes. His phone buzzed relentlessly on the table. Notifications from news outlets, emails from investors, and messages from his staff flooded the screen. The headlines were brutal: Glopure's false promises, Mateus Rodriguez, a marketing genius or a fraud? He clenched his jaw and swiped the phone into silent mode that he couldn't bring himself to face it yet. The glossy world he had built was crumbling faster than he could comprehend. Everything, his brand, his reputation, his empire, was at risk of slipping through his fingers. Upstairs, Sarah was sitting at her desk, exhausted but unable to sleep. The aftermath of the launch had hit her hard, though she wasn't surprised. She had tried to warn Mateus, but her concerns had been ignored. Still, seeing the backlash unfold had filled her with a mix of frustration and pity. She picked up her phone, hesitated, and then typed out a message: "Mateus, we need to talk. We have to address the product issues immediately before the situation gets worse." She sent the message, unsure if he would even respond. In the meantime, Mateus wandered aimlessly through the house, his thoughts spiraling. He found himself standing in front of the grand Christmas tree in the foyer, its ornaments gleaming under the morning sunlight. The sight stirred conflicting emotions within him: nostalgia for simpler times and resentment for what his life had become. His mind drifted back to the early days of Glopure, when the company was smaller and his ambitions seemed purer. He had started with a genuine passion for creating products that made people feel good about themselves. But somewhere along the way, his priorities had shifted. The drive for fame, wealth, and validation had eclipsed everything else. The sound of the doorbell snapped him out of his thoughts. A member of his legal team stood at the door, holding a folder filled with documents. "Mateus, we need to go over the damage control plan," the lawyer said, stepping inside. "Damage control," Mateus repeated bitterly, as if tasting the words. He motioned for the man to follow him into the study. Over the next hour, Mateus sat through a cold and clinical breakdown of the situation. Lawsuits were a possibility, the lawyer explained, particularly from customers who claimed adverse reactions to the serum. Social media was ablaze with criticism, and competitors were already capitalizing on Glopure's fall. "You'll need to issue a statement soon," the lawyer advised. "Something that acknowledges the situation but doesn't admit liability. We can draft it for you." Mateus barely heard the words. His mind was elsewhere, replaying the moments of the launch in vivid detail: the cheers, the applause, the whispered complaints, the influencer's pointed remark. After the lawyer left, Mateus sat in the study for hours, staring blankly at the documents. The weight of everything was crushing. For years, he had defined himself by his success, his image, his ability to turn dreams into reality. But now, all of that felt like a lie. Mid-afternoon, Sarah's message finally caught his attention. He read it but didn't reply immediately. Instead, he found himself pacing the mansion, his thoughts racing. Eventually, he stopped in front of a large mirror in the hallway. He stared at his reflection, trying to recognize the man he had become. The polished exterior, the expensive suit, the carefully curated persona, it all felt hollow. Suddenly, an overwhelming urge to leave the house gripped him. The walls felt too close, the silence too loud. He grabbed his coat and car keys, ignoring the puzzled looks of the cleaning staff as he walked out. Mateus drove aimlessly through Los Angeles, the city a blur of lights and noise. He passed familiar landmarks, places he used to visit before his life became consumed by Glopure. Eventually, he found himself in a quieter part of town, near the church his family had attended when he was a child. The sight of the old building brought an ache to his chest. He hadn't been inside in years, but something about it felt comforting, like an anchor in a storm. He parked the car and hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The church was nearly empty, its high ceilings amplifying the stillness. A few candles flickered near the altar, casting soft shadows on the walls. As Mateus walked further in, he noticed an elderly woman sitting in one of the pews, her hands clasped in prayer. It took him a moment to recognize her. Ms. Johnson had been a family friend, someone who had always been kind to him when he was a boy. She looked up and smiled warmly when she saw him. "Mateus," she said softly, her voice filled with genuine affection. It's been so long. He felt a lump in his throat as he sat down beside her. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to be vulnerable. He told her everything, the launch, the backlash, the crushing weight of failure. Ms. Johnson listened without interrupting, her expression a mixture of sympathy and understanding. When he finished, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. "This was given to me years ago," she said, handing it to him. "It helped me through a difficult time. Maybe it can help you, too." Matthias unfolded the paper. It was a simple card with the words, "True beauty comes from the soul. It's reflected in kindness, humility, and love." The simplicity of the message hit him harder than he expected. He stared at the card, his vision blurring with unshed tears. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice trembling. Ms. Johnson placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You've built so much, Matthias. But don't forget, what you give to the world matters more than what you take from it." Her words stayed with him as he left the church that evening. For the first time in days, the fog of despair began to lift. Matthias didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew one thing: it was time to make things right, not just for his company, but for himself. As he drove back to the mansion, he felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps failure wasn't the end. Perhaps it was an opportunity to start over, this time with a purpose that truly mattered. The following day dawned quietly, but the weight of failure still clung to Matthias. The mansion, once filled with the hum of productivity and laughter, now felt cavernous and cold. The launch party's decorations were being dismantled, the red carpet rolled up and carted away by staff who worked in solemn silence. The festive glow of the Christmas tree in the foyer felt out of place amidst the gloom, its twinkling lights unable to brighten the heavy atmosphere. Matthias sat alone at the kitchen counter, staring at the untouched breakfast that had been placed in front of him. His coffee had gone cold, and the plate of scrambled eggs and toast was barely touched. He had no appetite, no energy to face the mountain of challenges waiting for him. Glopure's reputation was in tatters, and with it, his carefully crafted public persona. For hours, he avoided the ringing of his phone and the constant flood of notifications. Investors, board members, employees, and journalists all demanded answers, but Matthias wasn't ready to face them. He wandered the house aimlessly, his thoughts circling the same endless loop of blame and regret. Around noon, something stirred within him. He remembered Ms. Johnson's kind smile and the small card she had given him the previous evening. He pulled it from his pocket and read the words again: "True beauty comes from the soul. It's reflected in kindness, humility, and love." The simplicity of the message struck him again. It was so different from the glossy, overproduced slogans he'd built his empire on. For the first time, he began to wonder if this moment of failure might hold a chance for change. Deciding he couldn't bear to stay in the house any longer, Matthias grabbed his coat and keys. He didn't have a clear destination in mind but felt an inexplicable pull toward the quiet solace of the church he'd visited the night before. The drive through Los Angeles was a stark contrast to his usual commutes in the city. There were no photographers waiting outside his mansion, no carefully chosen playlist pumping through the speakers of his car. Instead, the streets passed by in a blur, the holiday decorations on storefronts and streetlights barely registering in his mind. When he arrived at the church, it was quieter than before. The mid-afternoon sun cast soft beams of light through the stained glass windows, illuminating the rows of wooden pews. The faint scent of candles lingered in the air, a reminder of the prayers whispered within these walls. Matthias sat in a pew near the back, his head bowed as he wrestled with his thoughts. The church had been a place of comfort during his childhood, a refuge where he had learned about faith, kindness, and gratitude. But over the years, as his ambitions grew, he had distanced himself from those values. Sitting there now, he felt an overwhelming sense of loss, not just for his company, but for the person he used to be. The sound of footsteps broke his reverie. He looked up to see Ms. Johnson walking slowly down the aisle, her familiar smile warming the otherwise somber atmosphere. "I thought I might find you here," she said, her voice soft but steady. Matthias managed a faint smile as she sat beside him. You know, she began, I've seen a lot of people come and go in this church. Some were searching for answers, others for forgiveness. But the one thing they all had in common was that they left a little lighter than when they came in. Matthias didn't reply immediately. He struggled to put his feelings into words. I don't know what to do anymore, he admitted finally. I thought I had everything figured out. I thought, if I just worked harder, dreamed bigger, I could create something perfect. But now, everything's falling apart, and I don't even know who I am anymore. Ms. Johnson listened patiently, her eyes filled with understanding. You're not alone, Matthias, she said gently. Failure has a way of humbling us, of showing us what really matters. The question is, what will you do with this moment? Will you let it break you, or will you use it to rebuild something stronger, something better? Her words hung in the air, and for the first time in days, Matthias felt a spark of clarity. I don't even know where to start, he confessed to Ms. Johnson reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. It was old and slightly worn, its pages filled with handwritten notes. This belonged to my late husband, she explained. He was a builder, always working with his hands, always creating. When things got tough, he'd write down what he was grateful for, even if it was just something small, a warm meal, a kind word, a roof over his head. It helped him see what he still had, even when life felt overwhelming. She handed the notebook to Matthias, who took it hesitantly. Start with gratitude, she said. It doesn't have to be big or grand. Just take a moment to recognize what you've been given. From there, the path forward will become clearer. Matthias nodded, his grip tightening around the notebook. Thank you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Johnson smiled and patted his hand. You've got a good heart, Matthias. Don't let the world convince you otherwise. They sat in silence for a while, the soft light of the church wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. When Matthias finally left the church, the notebook tucked under his arm, he felt a small but significant shift within himself. He didn't have all the answers, but he had a starting point. On the drive home, he began to think about his team, the employees who had worked tirelessly to make the launch a reality, the ones he had ignored or dismissed in his pursuit of perfection. He thought about Sarah, who had tried to warn him about the product's flaws, and the junior staff who had stayed late into the night assembling gift bags for influencers. He realized that he had taken their efforts for granted, prioritizing his own ego over their hard work and expertise. If he was going to rebuild Glowpure, it had to start with them. As he pulled into the driveway of the mansion, the house no longer felt like a fortress of isolation. Instead, it seemed like a place where something new could begin. Matthias stepped inside and made his way to the study, where he opened the notebook Ms. Johnson had given him. On the first blank page, he wrote, grateful for a second chance to make things right. It was a small step, but for Matthias, it felt monumental. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to hope. The evening air inside the mansion was still and heavy, a stark contrast to the bustling energy it had held only days before. Matthias sat in his study, the small notebook given to him by Ms. Johnson open on the desk before him. The glow of the desk lamp illuminated his face, revealing the traces of exhaustion and vulnerability that had taken root in his features. The words he had written earlier, grateful for a second chance to make things right, stood alone on the otherwise blank page. They seemed both small and profound, a faint light amidst the darkness of his recent failure. Matthias stared at the words for a long moment, letting their meaning sink in. His mind replayed Ms. Johnson's advice, start with gratitude. It sounded simple enough, but for Matthias, it felt monumental. For years, his life had been about climbing higher, achieving more, and crafting an image of perfection. Gratitude had always been an afterthought, buried beneath the weight of his ambition. He flipped to the next page of the notebook and picked up a pen. Slowly, he began to write, grateful for my team. They believed in my vision, even when I didn't take the time to listen. Grateful for my family, even if I've drifted away from them. They gave me the foundation to build my dreams. Grateful for the chance to learn from my mistakes, even when it feels overwhelming. The act of writing was unexpectedly cathartic. Each word felt like a brick being placed in the foundation of something new, something stronger. As the hours passed, Matthias found himself reflecting deeply on the path that had brought him here. GlowPure had started as a passion project, born from a genuine desire to create products that empowered people to feel confident in their own skin. But somewhere along the way, the mission had been overshadowed by his pursuit of wealth and recognition. He thought about the early days of the company, when he had worked side by side with his small team, brainstorming ideas late into the night and celebrating even the smallest victories. Those moments had been filled with purpose and camaraderie, so different from the isolated, high-pressure environment GlowPure had become under his leadership. Matthias sighed and leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. The mistakes he had made felt glaringly obvious now. He had prioritized appearances over substance, ignored the voices of his team, and placed his ego above the integrity of his brand. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a call to action. The next morning, Matthias rose earlier than usual. The sunlight streaming through the windows of his bedroom felt like a quiet reminder of a fresh start. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of determination. He dressed simply, swapping his usual designer suit for a casual sweater and jeans. There was no need for pretense today. His first order of business was to meet with his team, many of whom had been working remotely or avoiding the office entirely since the fallout from the launch. Matthias drove himself to GlowPure's headquarters, a sleek building in the heart of Los Angeles. As he stepped inside, the atmosphere was tense. Employees worked quietly at their desks, avoiding eye contact with him. The usual buzz of energy that had defined the company in its heyday was noticeably absent. He made his way to the conference room, where a meeting with his senior staff had been scheduled. When he entered, the room fell silent. The faces around the table reflected a mix of exhaustion, frustration, and uncertainty. Sarah, his head of research, sat near the end of the table, her expression guarded. Matthias took a deep breath before speaking. "I owe all of you an apology," he began, his voice steady but earnest. "I let my ambition cloud my judgment. I ignored your concerns, dismissed your ideas, and placed the company, and all of you, in a position that was unfair and unsustainable." He paused, letting his words sink in. The room remained quiet, but he could sense a shift in the tension. "I want to take responsibility for what happened," he continued. "The launch failed because I didn't listen. I was so focused on what GlowPure could become that I lost sight of what made it special in the first place, the dedication, talent, and integrity of the people in this room." Sarah leaned forward slightly, her expression softening. "I can't undo the mistakes I've made," Matthias said, "but I can promise you this, moving forward, things will be different. I want us to rebuild GlowPure together, with honesty, transparency, and a renewed focus on creating something we can all be proud of." He looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each team member. "I need your help," he said. "I can't do this alone." For a moment, the room was silent. Then, Sarah spoke. "I appreciate your honesty, Matthias," she said. "It's not going to be easy to rebuild trust, with the team or with our customers. But if you're serious about making changes, I'm willing to give this another shot." One by one, the other team members voiced their support. The atmosphere in the room shifted from wary to hopeful, and for the first time in weeks, Matthias felt like they were all moving in the same direction. The meeting ended with a plan to address the immediate challenges facing the company, responding to customer complaints, revising the product line, and implementing stricter quality control measures. Matthias also announced that he would personally reach out to the junior staff members who had been most affected by the fallout, offering them his gratitude and support. Over the following days, Matthias threw himself into the work of rebuilding. He met with employees at every level of the company, listening to their concerns and ideas. He held town hall meetings to foster open communication and transparency. Slowly but surely, the energy in the office began to shift. At home, Matthias continued his practice of writing in the notebook Ms. Johnson had given him. Each night, he reflected on the progress he had made and the lessons he was learning. One evening, as he sat by the Christmas tree in his living room, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. An ornament near the top of the tree, a simple, handmade decoration from his childhood, stood out amidst the glittering baubles and lights that he reached for it, turning it over in his hands. It was a small wooden star, carved by his father years ago. Holding it, he felt a surge of emotion. For the first time in a long time, Matthias allowed himself to smile, a real, unguarded smile. The star reminded him of the values he had grown up with, the ones he was working to reclaim. As the lights of the Christmas tree twinkled softly around him, Matthias felt a sense of peace. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he was on the right path. And for the first time in years, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The first rays of dawn stretched across Los Angeles, casting a warm glow over the city. At Glopure's headquarters, the office was slowly coming to life as employees filed in, their faces marked by exhaustion and guarded hope. Despite the difficulties of the past weeks, there was a new energy in the air, a tentative optimism sparked by Matthias's recent efforts to repair the damage. For Matthias, the day was critical. It marked the first of a series of meetings aimed at rebuilding trust and strengthening relationships within his team. Though he had made strides with his senior staff, he knew that Glopure's true strength lay in the broader network of employees who had weathered the storm of the company's collapse. He arrived at the office early, dressed simply in a white button-down shirt and dark jeans. The usual fanfare that accompanied his presence, the crisp suits, the entourage, the calculated image, was absent. Matthias was determined to present himself not as the untouchable CEO, but as a leader ready to listen and learn. The first meeting of the day was scheduled with the marketing and content teams, the groups most directly impacted by the fallout from the failed product launch. When Matthias entered the conference room, he was met with a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and quiet anticipation. "Good morning, everyone," Matthias began, his tone calm but sincere. "Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the room. There were familiar faces, people who had been with Glopure since its early days, and newer team members who had joined during the company's rapid rise. Each one had contributed to the brand's success, and each had felt the sting of its recent failure. "I won't pretend that the past few weeks have been easy," Matthias continued. "I know many of you feel disheartened, frustrated, and even betrayed by what's happened. I take full responsibility for the choices that led us here." The room was silent, but the tension began to ease as Matthias's words sank in. "I want to start by saying thank you," he said. "Thank you for your hard work, your dedication, and your belief in Glopure, even when I didn't do enough to show that I valued it. I let my ambition blind me to the voices and perspectives that matter most, yours." He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table. "Today, I'm not here to make excuses or to defend my actions. I'm here to listen. I want to understand what went wrong from your perspective and how we can move forward, together." For a moment, no one spoke. Then, Sarah, who had joined the meeting to provide support, broke the silence. "This is a safe space," she said, addressing the team. "We're here to have an honest conversation, and that starts with you. What do you need from us, from Matthias, to feel confident in moving forward?" The room began to stir. One by one, team members raised their hands, voicing concerns that had long gone unspoken. "I feel like our input isn't taken seriously," one junior marketer said. "We worked hard on crafting realistic messaging for the serum, but it was overridden by exaggerated claims. We knew it might backfire." Another team member added, "It's hard to stay motivated when we're not looped into the bigger decisions. We're the ones who communicate the brand to the world, but sometimes it feels like we're just executing orders without context." A social media coordinator chimed in, "When the backlash started, we were left to manage the fallout without clear guidance. It felt like we were on our own." As the comments continued, Matthias listened intently, taking notes and nodding in acknowledgement. He felt the weight of their words, each one a reminder of how his leadership had faltered. But beneath the criticism, he also sensed a willingness to rebuild, if he could prove himself worthy of their trust. When the conversation paused, Matthias spoke. "I hear you," he said, his voice steady. "And you're right. I failed to create an environment where your expertise and insights were valued as they should be. That's going to change. He stood and walked to the whiteboard at the front of the room. Picking up a marker, he began to outline a plan. From now on, we'll prioritize collaboration and transparency, he said. Every major campaign will include input from across teams, and decisions will be made with your feedback in mind. We'll also hold regular town halls to keep everyone informed about the direction of the company. He turned back to face the group. But I know that words alone aren't enough. I need to show you, through my actions, that I'm serious about these changes. The room was quiet as Matthias put down the marker. Then, slowly, the team began to nod. I appreciate your honesty, Matthias, one senior marketer said. It's a good start. After the meeting ended, Matthias felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be long, but he was ready to walk it. The rest of the day was spent in similar meetings with other departments. In each one, Matthias emphasized his commitment to change and invited honest feedback. By the time the sun set, he had spoken with nearly every team at GlowPure. That evening, Matthias returned to the mansion feeling both drained and hopeful. As he sat by the Christmas tree, he reflected on the day's events. The conversations had been difficult, but they had also been necessary. He opened Ms. Johnson's notebook and wrote, "Grateful for the courage of my team. Their honesty is the foundation of our recovery." The next morning, Matthias gathered his leadership team to discuss the feedback he had received. Together, they began outlining a strategy for GlowPure's future, a plan built on honesty, integrity, and collaboration. In the weeks that followed, the changes began to take shape. Marketing campaigns were revised to reflect a more authentic message. The company launched an initiative to improve product quality, partnering with independent labs to ensure transparency, but perhaps the most significant change was in the culture of the company. Employees felt empowered to share their ideas and concerns, knowing they would be heard. The atmosphere at GlowPure transformed from one of tension and fear to one of mutual respect and shared purpose. For Matthias, the process of rebuilding was deeply personal. Each day, he reminded himself of Ms. Johnson's words, "True beauty comes from the soul." As the holiday season continued, Matthias made a point of reconnecting with the people who had supported him along the way. He reached out to his family, mending relationships that had been strained by years of neglect. He wrote heartfelt thank you notes to employees who had gone above and beyond during the crisis. On Christmas Eve, Matthias hosted a small gathering at the office. The event was simple, no red carpets, no over-the-top decorations, just a chance for the team to come together and celebrate their progress. As he looked around the room, Matthias felt a profound sense of gratitude. GlowPure was no longer just a brand, it was a community, one that he was honored to lead. That night, as he stood by the Christmas tree in his mansion, Matthias wrote one final note in the notebook, grateful for the chance to start again. The first Monday after Christmas dawned crisp and clear, a promising start to what Matthias hoped would be a turning point. For the first time in weeks, GlowPure's headquarters buzzed with a faint sense of optimism. The recent meetings with the team had begun to ease tensions, but Matthias knew words alone wouldn't be enough. Action was necessary, decisive, thoughtful action to rebuild not just the company's reputation but its very foundation. Matthias arrived at the office early, carrying a sense of purpose that had been missing for months. Dressed in a simple sweater and slacks, he felt more approachable than ever before. His usual entourage was absent, and he greeted every employee he passed, something he hadn't done in years. In the main conference room, his leadership team had already gathered. The table was filled with laptops, notebooks, and cups of coffee as his senior staff prepared for the meeting. Sarah, seated near the head of the table, gave Matthias a small nod as he entered. Over the past few weeks, she had emerged as a key ally in his efforts to rebuild GlowPure, offering candid advice and unwavering support. Matthias took a deep breath before addressing the room. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "Thank you for being here and for sticking with GlowPure during what I know has been an incredibly difficult time. Today, we're not just talking about damage control. We're planning the rebirth of this company, how we can move forward with integrity, innovation, and purpose." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Before we dive into specifics, I want to start by acknowledging something important. Our old way of doing things, the way I led, brought us to where we are now. And it wasn't good enough. If we're going to rebuild, we need to do more than fix mistakes. We need to fundamentally rethink how we operate, how we innovate, and how we treat our customers, our employees, and ourselves. The room was silent, the weight of his admission palpable. But as Matthias continued, the atmosphere shifted. Our first priority, he said, is regaining the trust of our customers. To do that, we need to start with complete transparency. He motioned to the whiteboard at the front of the room, where he had written 3 key points: quality, honesty, and community. Quality, Matthias explained, means delivering products that truly work, products we can stand behind without hesitation. That starts with re-evaluating every formula, every ingredient, and every claim we make. Sarah, I'd like you to lead this effort, with full support from the entire company. Sarah nodded, a determined look on her face. We'll conduct a full audit of our product line and partner with independent labs for third-party testing. If anything doesn't meet the highest standards, it won't go to market. Excellent, Matthias said. Next is honesty. Our customers deserve the truth, not just about our products but about our values and intentions. We need to communicate openly, even if it means admitting where we've fallen short. Daniel, the head of marketing, raised his hand. We can create a campaign that highlights this shift, he suggested. Maybe a series of behind-the-scenes videos showing the steps we're taking to improve. It's risky, but it could humanize the brand and show people we're serious about change. Matthias nodded thoughtfully. I like it. Let's workshop some ideas after this meeting. And finally, he continued, community. GlowPure isn't just a brand, it's a group of people, our team, our customers, and the broader world we serve. We need to start giving back in meaningful ways. That means supporting causes that align with our mission, involving customers in the process, and making GlowPure a force for good. Sarah added, we could launch a charitable initiative tied to our new product line. For every product sold, a percentage could go to organizations that promote sustainability or provide access to basic skincare in underserved communities. Exactly, Matthias said, his energy growing. Let's build that into the relaunch strategy. The conversation flowed naturally from there, with each team member contributing ideas and solutions. The sense of collaboration was refreshing, a stark contrast to the top-down decision-making that had defined GlowPure's earlier days. Matthias felt a deep sense of pride as he watched his team work together, their passion and expertise shining through. By the end of the meeting, they had outlined a comprehensive plan for GlowPure's rebirth. The next steps included product reformulation, a thorough review of every formula, led by Sarah's team, customer outreach, transparency campaigns to rebuild trust and engage directly with customers, philanthropy initiative, a new program to support sustainability and community-driven causes, internal culture shift, regular town halls, open feedback sessions, and better communication across departments. As the team filed out of the conference room, Matthias felt a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time in weeks, he believed that GlowPure could not only recover but emerge stronger and more authentic than ever. That afternoon, Matthias took the time to meet individually with employees from various departments. He visited the customer service team, thanking them for their patience and resilience during the backlash. He sat with the junior marketing staff, listening to their ideas for future campaigns. Each interaction reinforced his commitment to leading with humility and collaboration. Back at the mansion that evening, Matthias reflected on the day's progress. He sat by the Christmas tree, its lights casting a warm glow over the room. The notebook Ms. Johnson had given him lay open on his lap, its pages now filled with notes of gratitude and lessons learned. He added another entry, grateful for the power of teamwork. Today, I saw what GlowPure can become when we work together. As the days turned into weeks, GlowPure's transformation began to take shape. Customers who had been critical of the brand began to notice the changes, and early feedback from the transparency campaigns was promising. The philanthropic initiative gained traction, earning praise from influencers and media outlets alike, but for Matthias, the most meaningful change was the shift in Glopure's culture. Employees felt empowered to share their ideas, and collaboration became the norm rather than the exception. The company no longer revolved around his ego, it had become a collective effort, driven by shared values and a common purpose. One evening, as Matthias reviewed the latest progress reports, he received an unexpected email from a longtime customer. The message read, "I've been following Glopure since the beginning, and I was disappointed by the recent launch. But I've also seen the steps you've taken to make things right, and it's clear that you're committed to real change. Thank you for listening. I'll be rooting for you." Matthias smiled, a deep sense of fulfillment washing over him. The journey was far from over, but this moment reaffirmed everything he had been working toward. As he closed his laptop, Matthias glanced at the star-shaped ornament on his Christmas tree, a reminder of his roots and the values he was striving to reclaim. Glopure's rebirth wasn't just about salvaging a brand. It was about creating something meaningful, something that reflected the best of who they could be. And for the first time in a long time, Matthias felt like he was on the right path. The evening of December 31st arrived with a rare stillness in the air, as if the world itself was preparing for a transition. For Matthias, it was more than just the end of the calendar year. It was the culmination of weeks of introspection, reconciliation, and rebuilding, a moment to reflect on how far he and Glopure had come and to chart a course for the future. The Glopure headquarters had been transformed for a small New Year's Eve celebration. Unlike the grandiose events Matthias once favored, this gathering was intimate and understated. The team had worked together to set up a cozy, welcoming space in the office's main atrium. Strings of warm lights hung from the rafters, and the scent of fresh pine filled the air, mingling with the soft notes of a live acoustic guitarist. Employees and their families filled the room, sharing stories, laughter, and plates of catered food that reflected a mix of cultures and traditions. The atmosphere was one of genuine warmth and camaraderie, a stark contrast to the high-pressure environment that had once defined the company. Matthias stood by the entrance, greeting each person as they arrived. He felt a sense of pride and gratitude as he watched his team interact. There was no hierarchy tonight, no divisions between departments, just a group of people united by a shared purpose. Sarah approached him with a glass of sparkling cider, her expression light. "You've done good, Matthias," she said, handing him the glass. "Not alone," Matthias replied, taking the glass. "None of this would have been possible without all of you." She smiled. "Still, it's nice to see you back in the mix." The old Matthias might have been watching this from the sidelines, planning his next big move. This one seems to understand the value of being present. Matthias laughed softly. "You're not wrong. I've spent too much time chasing the future. It's nice to finally appreciate the moment." The evening unfolded with a mix of light-hearted games, heartfelt toasts, and an impromptu karaoke session that left the room in fits of laughter. Matthias joined in, much to the amusement of his team, singing an off-key rendition of a classic holiday tune. It was a far cry from the image he once projected, but it felt right. As midnight approached, the crowd gathered near the large windows overlooking the city. From the atrium's vantage point, Los Angeles glittered like a sea of stars, its energy palpable even from a distance. Matthias stood near the front of the group, holding a microphone. He cleared his throat and the room quieted. "I don't want to keep you all too long before the countdown," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I felt it was important to take a moment to reflect on what this year has meant for us, for me." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "I'll be honest. There were moments this year when I thought we'd lost everything. The mistakes I made put Glopure in jeopardy and strained the trust we've built with each other and with our customers. But instead of giving up, you all chose to stand by me, to work tirelessly to rebuild this company, not just its reputation, but its soul." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "I've learned more in these past few months than I have in years," Matthias continued. "I've learned that success isn't about perfection or appearances. It's about integrity, about listening to the people around you, and about staying true to your values. Glopure started as a dream to create something meaningful, and thanks to all of you, I believe we're on our way back to that." He raised his glass, his voice firm. "So, here's to all of you, to your dedication, your resilience, and your belief in what we can accomplish together. And here's to the year ahead, a year of growth, honesty, and impact." The room erupted into applause, glasses clinking as everyone echoed his sentiment. 3 minutes to midnight, someone called out, and the group began to count down the seconds. Matthias stepped back, watching as his team laughed and cheered. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, one he hadn't experienced in years. This moment wasn't about him, it was about all of them, about the community they had created and the future they were building together. As the final seconds ticked away, the room joined in unison. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. A chorus of cheers filled the air as the clock struck midnight. Fireworks lit up the Los Angeles skyline, their vibrant colors reflected in the atrium's glass windows. Matthias stood quietly for a moment, taking it all in. He felt a tap on his shoulder and turned to see Sarah, holding out a small envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it," she said with a smile. Inside was a handwritten note. "True beauty comes from the soul. It's reflected in kindness, humility, and love." Matthias recognized the words instantly. They were the same ones Ms. Johnson had given him on the small card weeks earlier. "How did you?" he began, but Sarah shook her head. "I didn't. Ms. Johnson sent this to the office a few days ago. She said you'd know what to do with it." Matthias smiled, a lump forming in his throat. He looked out at the fireworks once more, the note clutched tightly in his hand. As the celebrations continued around him, Matthias felt a profound sense of clarity. Glowpure wasn't just a company. It was an opportunity, a chance to create something that reflected the values he had rediscovered, the values he now understood to be the true foundation of success. That night, as the festivities wound down and the last guests departed, Matthias returned to his mansion. He placed the note from Ms. Johnson beside the notebook where he had been recording his reflections. On the next blank page, he wrote, "Grateful for the power of second chances and the people who make them possible." He closed the notebook and sat by the Christmas tree, its lights still glowing softly. For the first time in years, Matthias felt at peace, with himself, with his team, and with the path ahead. The year ahead would be challenging, but Matthias was ready. Glowpure's rebirth was no longer just a goal, it was a reality in progress, built on a foundation of honesty, community, and purpose. As he looked out at the first dawn of the new year, Matthias felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The morning after the New Year's Eve celebration arrived quietly, the world outside bathed in a soft, golden light. Matthias awoke in his bedroom, his mind unusually clear. The weight he had carried for months seemed lighter now, replaced by a growing sense of purpose. The notebook from Ms. Johnson rested on the nightstand beside him, its cover slightly worn from U.S.E. As he dressed in casual clothes, a simple sweater and jeans, Matthias caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. He looked different. Not in a physical sense, but in his demeanor. The man staring back at him was no longer burdened by the need to project perfection. There was a quiet confidence in his eyes, one born of humility and the resolve to rebuild. He made his way to the kitchen, where the scent of fresh coffee greeted him. Pouring a cup, he sat at the counter and opened the notebook. The words he had written the night before, "Grateful for the power of second chances and the people who make them possible," stared back at him, grounding him in the moment. Today was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Glowpure but for Matthias himself. The first item on his agenda was a meeting with Sarah and Daniel at Glowpure's headquarters. Over the past weeks, they had become his closest confidants, helping to steer the company through its recovery. Together, they had crafted a roadmap for Glowpure's relaunch, built on transparency, quality, and community. When Matthias arrived at the office, he was greeted by an unexpected sight. The atrium, which had been filled with laughter and celebration the night before, was now bustling with activity. Employees moved between desks and meeting rooms, their energy vibrant and focused. The change in atmosphere was palpable, a testament to the progress they had made as a team. Sarah and Daniel were waiting for him in the conference room, a spread of documents and presentation slides laid out on the table. "Good morning," Matthias said, smiling as he took his seat. "Morning," Sarah replied. "Ready to dive in?" "Absolutely," Matthias said, his tone filled with determination, Daniel began the presentation, outlining the finalized plans for the company's next steps. The relaunch campaign, titled GlowPure Reimagined, would focus on authenticity and inclusivity, with messaging designed to rebuild trust with customers. We've partnered with independent labs for third-party testing, Daniel explained, pointing to one of the slides. The results will be made public on our website. This level of transparency is going to set us apart. Sarah chimed in, we've also developed an updated product line with improved formulas. Each product is designed to meet the highest standards of quality and effectiveness. No exaggerations, no false promises, just results. Matthias nodded, impressed by their work. This is exactly what we need. Let's make sure every department is aligned on the messaging. I want everyone to feel ownership of this relaunch. The discussion continued for hours, covering everything from marketing strategies to supply chain logistics. By the time the meeting ended, Matthias felt a renewed sense of optimism. The plan was ambitious, but it was grounded in the values he had worked so hard to reclaim. After the meeting, Matthias decided to take a walk through the office. He stopped by the customer service department, where a team of representatives was busy responding to inquiries and feedback. One of them, a young woman named Carla, looked up as he approached. Mr. Rodriguez, she said, slightly surprised. Is there something I can help you with? Just Matthias is fine, he said, smiling. I wanted to thank you and the rest of the team for your hard work. I know it hasn't been easy, especially after the launch, but your dedication hasn't gone unnoticed. Carla's expression softened. Thank you. That means a lot. We've been doing our best to show customers that we're committed to making things right. And you're doing an incredible job, Matthias said. Keep it up. If there's anything you need, my door is always open. As he continued through the office, Matthias made a point of engaging with employees from every department. He listened to their ideas, answered their questions, and expressed his gratitude. Each interaction reinforced his belief that GlowPure's strength lay not in its products or branding, but in its people. That evening, Matthias returned to the mansion feeling more grounded than he had in years. He sat by the Christmas tree, which still stood in the foyer, its lights twinkling softly. The holiday season was officially over, but Matthias wasn't ready to take it down just yet. The tree had become a symbol of his journey, a reminder of where he had been and how far he had come. The star-shaped ornament from his childhood hung near the top, catching the light in a way that seemed almost magical. Matthias opened the notebook once more, flipping through its pages. Each entry told a story of growth and transformation, a record of the lessons he had learned. On a blank page, he wrote, "Grateful for a team that inspires me to be better every day. Grateful for the chance to rebuild with integrity and purpose. Grateful for the journey ahead." As he set the notebook aside, Matthias's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from one of GlowPure's social media accounts, sharing the first results of their transparency campaign. The post featured a video of Sarah and her team in the lab, explaining the rigorous testing process behind the new product line. The comment section was filled with messages of support and encouragement. "This is what we needed to see," one user wrote. "It's clear that GlowPure is serious about change. I can't wait to try the new products." Matthias felt a swell of pride as he read the comments. The path they had chosen wasn't easy, but it was worth it. GlowPure was no longer just a brand, it was a testament to resilience, honesty, and the power of second chances. That night, as Matthias prepared for bed, he glanced out the window at the city below. The lights of Los Angeles stretched out like a tapestry, each one representing a story, a dream, a possibility. For the first time in years, Matthias felt truly at peace. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to face it, with his team, his values, and his newfound sense of purpose guiding the way. GlowPure's journey wasn't just about selling products or achieving success. It was about creating something meaningful, something that reflected the best of who they were, and for Matthias, it was only the beginning. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your favorite part in the comments below. Your support means so much to us. See you in the next video.